My name is Donna Byrd. I'm with BlueButterfly, and today we have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Kristina Kiefer. She is going to tell us a little bit about herself, and then we'll dive right into questions. So, Dr. Kiefer, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. So my biggest background is I'm a veterinarian. So I work in the pet space and with pets every day in one form or another. A big component of being a veterinarian is euthanasia and pet loss. And it is a component of our work that we're prepared for on a medical level, but not necessarily on the human support level. So in spite of it being a large component of our work, I always felt at a loss for how to guide owners beyond the euthanasia or the pet loss. My major focus in vet med is specialized, but it's actually in surgery. Being a veterinarian, we tend to have lots of pets and have a very profound relationship with those pets. So along the way, I acquired one of the most profound relationships in my life, Shakate, my Siberian Husky. She joined me my second year of vet school, and she was there from that point on until I lost her 16 years later. So she actually had a pretty profound impact on my journey in veterinary medicine as a reference point for what a pet owner might be feeling, what a pet owner might be experiencing on the veterinary side of things. She was everything you can imagine.
Right.
A best friend, a cheerleader, an avenue for my mental health. She made sure I got outside and walked her and had adventures with her. So she was a very profound relationship in my life. And with every love comes loss. So at some point, I ended up losing her. A couple years before I lost her, I actually lost a human friend and teammate, and it was quite sudden and quite tragic. So I explored quite a bit trying to navigate that grief and came across a very helpful resource for me, which was a journaling guide. And that helped me process that grief quite significantly. When it came time to losing Shakate, I looked for similar resources. In fact, I actually went through the journaling course a second time with Shakate in mind, and I actually found it quite challenging to get the same value out of it because it was designed for human loss, and it's not the same. It's profoundly different. So recognizing that I didn't have the same tools and resources, and Shakate actually was an even more profound loss, I started researching what was available for pet loss, and it is starkly minimal compared to what is available for human loss. Right. And that's what led to the creation of Mourning Paws, was filling that need that I had and couldn't find the resources for.
That's very helpful. Can you tell us a little bit more about what VetSmart and Mourning Paws offer?
Yeah. So VetSmart is kind of the foundation of my daily work. It encompasses both my clinical practice and the mission of VetSmart, which is to actually supply resources and support for everybody in the veterinary field, whether that's owners, practice owners, other veterinarians. There's actually a pretty profound need in veterinary medicine for mental well-being support and support beyond the clinic floor. And so VetSmart encompasses providing that support. So on the clinical side, I provide relief support for people that need to step away from the clinic or don't have the clinicians to fill the need that they have. And alongside that, I've also got several resources for supporting veterinarians to be fulfilled and happy in their career and well supported. And a big component of that we don't have great resources for is grief.
Right.
So Mourning Paws is a facet of VetSmart, but Mourning Paws is specifically focused on grief support.
Grief support. And can you tell us a little bit more about what that might look like for someone who's grieving?
Yeah. So the goal of Mourning Paws is to provide resources for anyone that's grieving.
Yeah.
If we don't have the resources, we want to be able to direct people towards the resources that are most helpful for them.
Right.
Our creation and kind of our unique offering is a journaling course to walk people through their grief journey and provide them support to navigate that pet loss. That grief tends to be quite a bit different than human loss, and is actually considered, the professional terms used as disenfranchised. So pet loss grief tends to not be validated or not be recognized as significant as the loss of humans. And I've actually had many owners that tell me that it was the most important relationship in their life, and they just don't have any other relationship that's close. Some say they don't even have other friends or family members. And so the need for support is massive because so many people feel invalidated, and yet it's really lacking.
Right. You said a few moments ago, you shared with us that the loss of a human and a loss of a pet can be extremely different, which is one of the catalysts for you starting Mourning Paws. But it's interesting because people that do not have pets might think that you mean that having a human loss might be far more profound than a pet. They might not understand the differences. You just alluded to that for a few minutes, but can you talk to us a little bit more about why there's that relationship with a pet that might be slightly different than human, and that might manifest itself in ultimately not only the relationship, but ultimately the grieving of the relationship?
Yeah. There's many aspects to that, or many facets to that. One of them is the purity of that relationship. You know, human relationships are pretty complex. Even your most beloved human can at times hurt you and, make you feel betrayed, or have multiple episodes where you guys have met challenges in that relationship and not necessarily worked through those. Whereas a pet, by and large, is a completely validated or validating support system. You never really question if they're on your side. So that level of support and commitment in a relationship is pretty profound and extremely painful when you lose that, if you don't have other relationships along those lines.
Right.
You also play so many different roles in your relationship with your pet that aren't necessarily in play with a human. You might play those roles in small components with different relationships.
Right.
But with a pet, you are a caregiver, so you have a degree of responsibility for them that you may not have with a lot of your human relationships. They are with you every minute that you're at home, or, actually, you often spend more time with your pet than you spend with most of your human relationships. And so they're integrated into your routine so much more profoundly than a lot of human relationships. You also often bear the burden of making the final life decisions, which rarely comes with your relationships with humans. So not only are you the caretaker, not only are you a friend, some people consider themselves the level of a parent with that pet. You now have to make the life and death decision for them, and that can bear a huge burden that is really hard to navigate. And again, that's not a component of the vast majority of human relationships. And so that isn't a component of grief navigation with human relationships.
That's very helpful. Just for the people that are watching, will you share the URL that people can go to find you?
Yeah. So Mourning Paws can be found at www.mourningpaws, and it's mourning, MOURNING, .org.
Perfect. And we'll also have that in the caption too, so you'll
Thank
be
you.
able to refer to that. How do you believe the veterinary profession can better support pet owners when they're experiencing this grief?
Yeah. I think having tools and having resources to direct people towards would be massively helpful. For many of these pets, we are actually there for the vast majority of their life. We're a big component of the experience for both the pet and the owner. And after the euthanasia or after the pet loss, we're suddenly at a loss. We don't have a lot to offer them. And it's not necessarily our place to support them in the navigation of the grief itself. There's therapists and there's social workers and there's resources like Mourning Paws that are much better equipped to do that. But having the awareness of what is accessible to the owners and being willing to share those is where I think we can serve the owner best. Even though the pet is not physically with us, that relationship is ongoing and it's under evolution.
Got it. And without disclosing too much about Mourning Paws, because we, of course, want our readers to go there our viewers to go there and to see what you have to offer. But can you share with us a few tips on how people can deal with grief and how pet owners can deal with grief? And whether it's the journaling process or something else, what other things can they do?
Yeah. So one of the biggest pointers I can give is every loss is unique. So, you probably will have lost more than one pet or will lose more than one pet, and each experience is going to be profoundly different. And so you might find you need different resources for different losses. So don't be afraid to explore and don't be afraid to redirect if something is not working for you. One thing that I think is not well in place that a lot of people have in place for the loss of a human is that support system.
Mhm.
And I don't mean that to negate the humans that are in your life and that care for you, but they didn't have the same relationship that you did with that pet. Culturally, in the Western culture, we're conditioned to not value that loss to the same degree that humans do. And so the meal trains don't get set up for when you lose a pet. You don't get a day off from work when you lose a pet. One of the biggest things that I think we can do is give ourselves a little bit of grace and understanding. You don't have the same support system in place. You actually have to put in work to get that degree of support system.
Right.
And so it's not going to be smooth. So it'll be painful. You'll have to probably ask for help where it may have been offered freely with a human loss. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to communicate. And don't be afraid to explore what might help you. Mourning Paws specifically, there's a few different resources we offer. We have one free source that you can contact us and get a resource guide with many different options or some of the more common avenues for grief support in pet loss. So if that's where you want to start, just give us a shout and we will happily share that with you. If you want more directed guidance and you're a little bit more autonomous or not necessarily looking for an active in-person social group, the journaling course can actually be very helpful. It's very personalized because it's giving you illumination into your grief process and helping you develop the words and the understanding to communicate your grief as you see fit.
Mm.
There is a support system in place online with our journaling course. So it's other grievers and then the staff of Mourning Paws to help validate and witness your grief and support you in that grief as well.
That's very helpful. Dr. Kiefer, can you tell us, do you have any words of wisdom or advice for individuals who are trying to support the person who's lost their pet?
Yeah.
Are there things to say or any things
to Yeah. One of the hardest things as a griever, I think, is the tendency that we as humans have to want to fix things, and you can't fix grief. Your instinct is going to be to try to fix your friend or your partner's hurt and try to make that hurt go away. And that can actually be pretty profoundly painful because in a way it's invalidating the level of hurt that they're experiencing. So give them the comfort of your presence. Be willing to listen to what they need. They might not know what they need. And so just you being there and you willing to sit with them, and if they can't or don't want to talk, just be there with them. If they do want to talk, give them the space to express their feelings. And when it gets scary, and grief often gets scary, you don't have to fix it and you don't have to run away. It's okay to just be there.
That's great advice. Great advice. Are there any words that you think are helpful? For example, that's what I think often people are trying to fix in the absence of not knowing what to do. I think being present is good, but are there any words that can be particularly helpful for someone at that point?
I think questions more than statements are very helpful. So the platitudes do help some people. That's a very individual thing. It can be very painful for other people to hear. One of the most painful things I think to hear is you'll feel better soon, or it'll be better soon. There comes a point in some grief where you don't care that it's going to be better. You need to be able to feel those negative emotions. And it almost feels like a dismissal for people to say, it's all right, it'll get better.
Right.
Asking questions. So do you need help with day-to-day living? Can I send you groceries? Can I listen to you? Do you want to hear memories that I have about your pet? The question, what would be most helpful to you, is comforting to some degree. When someone's experiencing a pretty profound loss, it can add more to their plate, trying to think how to help you. So having very specific questions about offerings can be really helpful for them.
That's extremely helpful. And I think there will be many of our viewers that find that advice to assist them in these moments when they're trying to support people that they love who've lost their pets.
That's a really hard part of grieving that we don't recognize either, is how do we be there for people that are grieving?
Exactly. How do you envision the future of pet loss services evolving, and what role do you see Mourning Paws playing in that evolution?
Yeah, I think it's actually going to become more and more important going forward. We are in the midst of generations that are more and more self-aware and more willing to explore how to meet those challenges in life. We are also in the midst of generations that are actually choosing not to develop nuclear families as traditionally recognized. And millennials and the generations coming after them often have pets instead of kids and find a really profound relationship with those pets and are looking for the resources to help that grief. So I think the need is only going to increase going forward. the Mourning Paws, I think, is in a great position to help that need. And I think there will be a need for more creative resources for navigating pet loss. Because again, every loss is unique and every individual is unique. So Mourning Paws might work great for many people, and for another person, they may need much more individualized care. They might want to work with a therapist. Some people actually have quite adverse experiences with therapists and want to work with a coach. Some people just want to express themselves and have a platform and an avenue to share that grief, but don't necessarily want the feedback that comes a lot of times with sharing that grief. And that's where Blue Butterflies can be an amazing avenue for some people, whether it's sharing a memorial page so that other people can express their grief and that griever can then engage when they have the time and space. Or perhaps even posting anonymously, just getting that grief and getting those painful feelings out there can be therapeutic.
That's very helpful. Dr. Kiefer, can you share any success stories or meaningful experiences that you've had in supporting pet owners?
Yeah. I'm going to share a couple personalized experiences that have given me permission, which I think are actually some of the most profound testaments for what Mourning Paws can offer. So I created Mourning Paws and the journaling experience, but I wanted to make sure that it was helpful, that it wasn't just an individualized, this is what I needed, but it walks within the realm of scientific and validated therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually recruited a couple social workers to look over the materials that I created and give feedback and help redesign it to be helpful. And one of those social workers has actually come on board as a member of Mourning Paws after having used the tool herself with her own pet loss. It made a significant impact on her navigating that grief, even as a social worker. Our participant support leader, Lori, who is kind of the lifeblood and heart and soul of Mourning Paws, currently was actually a study participant. So the resources that we've developed, we've actually undergone a scientific study with to evaluate the helpfulness of it. And Lori joined the study very early on when she lost her pet, Hooper. And after having completed it, she was so invested in the usefulness of the tool and of Mourning Paws that she actually chased me down multiple times, month after month, asking if she could be a part of Mourning Paws, and very persistently until we recognized, we need to invest money in having a support person and having somebody in place to be a touch point for everybody involved. So Mourning Paws is made up of people that have needed and experienced what we've created.
That's excellent. So they've already been through the process themselves, so they're able to empathize even more deeply with you. With people. Out of curiosity, with regard to veterinarians, what type of support do you offer them, or what do you encourage either colleagues of veterinarians that may be struggling with grief because they've had quite a bit of loss, or even family members of veterinarians? How is that different than just the pet human loss? I mean, the human pet loss. If it's your work versus your actual pet family member.
Yeah, that is a great question. Thank you for asking it. It brings a whole different level of experience of that grief. So having the knowledge doesn't necessarily make it easier, and in some ways it makes it more difficult. the vast majority of people, I think, second guess their decision as to when the right time to let their pet go. Guilt is actually a really profound and common experience that we find with participants in Mourning Paws. And I think that level of guilt can actually be even more significant in the veterinary community, because you know how far you can take it. You have some personal bias in having watched some pet owners take it to a point where you thought it went too far. And then you've got pet owners that if you were in their position, you would have taken it farther, or what the outcome might be, or what the average expectation is. And so finding your place in where you belong on that spectrum is really challenging. And having that experience will make you second guess your decision even more going forward. So I think there's a lot of unique aspects to grieving pet loss for anybody in the veterinary field. So there's actually going to be multiple offerings that Mourning Paws has, and grief support specific to people in the vet field or in the pet industry is going to be one of the offerings that we end up developing and providing. Every resource that we offer, we want validated, so it will undergo a study. So there will be a lot of similarities towards the pet owner resource and the veterinary resource, but there will be more difficult questions like what do you regret, or what are challenges with you navigating the peace with the decision that you made, and probably the discussion will be on a more medical level or a more technical level than with your normal pet owner. There's also a pretty significant component that I think goes under recognized, and the term I've applied to it is called collateral grief. So many of us that have a relationship with that pet and with that owner over the course of the life of the pet have some degree of grief when we euthanize that pet. Even if we don't know them really well, we have been involved in their life in a pretty profound way, and we carry that forward. And yet we're often overbooked in our day. So, we might have a euthanasia for one appointment, and then 30 minutes later have to go in with a brand new puppy and a family that's had their first pet and be able to navigate and educate them. And so that grief gets put on the shelf. By the end of the day, we're exhausted and overwhelmed and don't have the tools or the time or the energy to take it back off the shelf and manage it. And so I found my grief often popping up significantly when I was faced with other people's grief and in the clinical setting. And so you compound that enough and you don't deal with it, and it's going to come up someplace somehow.
Right.
And so a big component of what we want to offer the veterinary community is managing that collateral grief and giving them tools to actually address it and intentionally manage it.
For those who, thank you very much for that. I'm sure that will be very helpful for our viewers. For those that are just tuning in, can you share the URL once again?
Yeah, www.mourningpaws.org, and it's mourning, MOURNING.
Mourningpaws.com. Okay, perfect.
.org.
.org. Okay, perfect. Okay.
Too many options out there.
That's right. We'll also include that in the comments. Are there any specific rituals or practices that you recommend to help parents memorialize their pets and find closure?
Yeah, I think that's a very individual need. I I personally actually took Shikate's ashes with me to the place we first had a long backpacking trip, and
Mhm.
brought along 2 of the people that we spent the most time backpacking with. And I released her ashes at a location that we had actually all rested and just sat in bliss and enjoyed, and was a pretty profound memory for us. I think tapping into your spiritual foundations can be really helpful. So, of the 3 members of Mourning Paws, myself, Francesca, and Lori, we actually all come from very different spiritual backgrounds, and so the rituals and the memorialization is fairly different even amongst the 3 of us. Um, Lori has more of a Buddhist background, and so she's developed a wonderful piece on our website about developing an altar for her dog Hooper. Uh, we've got other people that have actually had funeral services for their pets, or had an end of life celebration and invited people to their pets. I think if you've experienced loss and grief in the past, looking back and reflecting on that and what was meaningful and helpful to you can be really useful to think about what you'd like to implement for your own pet. Memorial gardens is another option that a lot of people really connect with. So I've planted rose bushes with a pet's body or their ashes as the foundation for that growth and beauty. I've got portraits around my house and my work and places where Shikate really had an impact that I can look at and reflect on.
Wonderful. We also offer the memorial pages
Yeah.
for those that are interested as well. It gives you a sort of a space for you to write the story of your
Mhm.
pet's life, and to collect to post photos, and also collect photos from others. For
Mhm.
example, in your situation where you have friends that joined you that might have pictures of Shikate,
Mhm.
to include them and share them with you, and
Yeah.
then just offer their condolences as well.
And that can be a very helpful strategy for a lot of people. And having the page in existence is really useful because you're going to go through different phases of needs and wants in your grief. So in the very beginning, you might not want a lot of input or feedback from people, but as you progress along, those memories that people are willing to share, those photos that people are willing to share, that can be really profound in helping you and validating your grief as well, and having the memorial page that you have the ability to control when you visit, when you view it, when you contribute. That can be massively helpful for a lot of people.
Right. We actually, interestingly enough, we actually built the pet pages on a very similar platform that we built humans.
Hmm.
So we borrow from what we know from human grief, and we apply that to pets with some changes. Some things are different,
Yeah.
but we allow people. So we find that people with humans often will post a page even on the birth date.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes they're not ready right when their loved one passes, but on the
Yeah.
birthday of their loved one, or on the anniversary of his or her passing, there's a desire to go ahead and honor their loved one, and they post at that point, and they get the outpouring of love from their networks as well. So we've found those to be very helpful as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What message or advice, Dr. Kiefer, would you like to offer our audience who may be experiencing grief right at this time?
Yeah. Give yourself space and give yourself grace. You're going through a really hard thing. For some of you, it's going to be the very first time. For others, you may have actually already experienced loss of a pet, and this one is different and shocking. So not every pet loss will be equivalent. Give yourself the willingness and the ability to communicate what you need. in your support, in your validation. For some of you, it's going to be, I can't handle communication right now. I just need some space and some time alone to process things. And don't be afraid to explore. There's a massive opportunity and a massive space for creativity in grief. Creativity can actually be quite therapeutic when you're grieving.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Kristina Kiefer, we thank you so much for joining us today. You have really shared some advice for our viewers that I'm confident will be helpful for them. And we appreciate you taking what was grief in your life and being able to develop tools to help other people navigate through this process. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to share.
Thank you.